to it, we needed to have a system that was ours.
Mhm.
So if there wasn't anything we needed to experiment with or try or push a barrier, um, we weren't constrained. We weren't stopped from that creative impulse, moving into something that we think could be really cool, because clause 42 in the OGL agreement says you can't do that or you have to do this. So that was really
Right.
the impetus for it. And then Eddie took the ball, as it were. As we threw it, he ran into the yard and
He fetched it and
the
brought
ball,
it
a
back.
ball, a
Right.
ball, there's a ball. Uh,
Well,
but ran with it and did a fantastic job of making again, I guess my way of saying it, a die 20 system that really shines.
Excellent.
thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, I know part of it was because that just kind of, cards on the table, as it were. We had originally done a Pathfinder first edition version of Scarlands, and then Pathfinder second edition came out, and we realized that meant that Scarlands was beholden to other companies making business decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And again, full disclosure, when Rich was like, we can kind of push this around system, I was like, I think that the crowd will react badly to that. We should probably keep at least some of the OGL stuff in place, because surely they won't change the OGL. And then fast forward to January 2023, and I was like, burn it to the ground, set it on fire, shove it into the ocean. I had a moment. I was distressed.
He had a
Rich talked me down. It's like, Eddie, it's okay, calm down. No, it's all ruined. But ultimately came down to, I mean, we were already going that direction. This was just kind of, it pushed me particularly into the next logical step, which is, okay, let's just really completely cut the umbilical cord to the OGL entirely, both in a legal sense and in a design sense. It's okay if it resembles D&D and D&D style systems, because that was honestly the original goal entirely, right? The original goal was that it was supposed to be evocative of classic traditional fantasy systems without actually being those systems.
So we could spin off of those, we could bounce off of those, we could take an expectation and kind of torque it, which is, what happens with Pugmire and all the monarchies of Mao and all the realms, is that, up until the point we did it, there weren't any games where people were running around in a pretty straightforward fantasy environment, but were playing animals, uplifted animals and stuff like that. There's obviously individual characters that popped up into things, but this was unique, and so that was part
of course, since then, there have been so many games like this, and it's just like, you're all stealing. No, you're not stealing from me. I honestly think it just came down to the idea of dogs in D&D just touched a lot of people, and so everyone kind of, whether they knew about Pugmire or not, I think it was kind of in the
wait, we could do that? Yeah.
Right, but certainly I've had many people where a Kickstarter go up, I'll get a bunch of private messages like, hey, these people are doing a game with dogs in D&D, you should sue them. And I'm just like, whoa.
He's down.
First of all, I don't have a lawyer, so I mean that's step one that we just can't even do. But beyond that, it's like, it's okay if other people make games, fantasy games with dogs in them, as long as they're not, directly copying our stuff. But certainly, this past year has made it to the point where being beholden to other companies' business decisions in a way that you do not have a reciprocal business relationship has made me very, very leery. And so, like, Richard and I can have a conversation. We can decide, Pugmire needs to go in this direction, or Scarlet needs to go in that direction, or crossword companies to go in this direction, and we can have a conversation and make those decisions as people. But to have somebody else, we don't even know who they are, make a business decisions, and that drags us off course. Right. Then that's just increasingly frustrating. I don't think a direction we want to go in any further.
I think that's a fair assessment and breakdown, especially of how it looked from the cheap seats, as it were. I felt a great swell of empathy when that particular fire kicked off at that particular time. But
just disturbance in the force.
I think you handled it like a champ, Eddie. Just in case nobody's told you.
Well, my therapist thanks you, because I'm still getting over that.
Mr. Webb, please come in from off the ledge.
No doubt, difficult times. But I did want to take that to kind of segue a little bit into some of the I guess brass tacks of Onyx20, and sometimes I get a little mixed up between what I see and what Kickstarter backers get.
Sure.
So if I remember correctly, the Kickstarter manuscript at the time for Realms still had some of that vestigial language in it, or did it actually
No,
get?
I did manage to write it before the Kickstarter. So the timeline actually was
2 weeks before that.
Oh yeah. Oh, trust me, I'll go there. But I started work on Onyx20 / Realms of Pugmire at the beginning of 2021, actually. And that was around the time Rich and I started to have a conversation. We actually had a few months where we kicked the outline back around that. Travis was part of this conversation as well, where it's like, here's kind of the high level changes I want to make. And it was things like, I want to completely change how the math with monsters works because it just doesn't work in D&D the way as it's described. I want to change all how the attributes are. I want to reframe charisma because charisma is not used nearly as often in D&D as it should be. And some of it was like minor like that. Some was pretty major, but basically kind of here's the major steps. And so that kind of led to a conversation with me and Rich about what is your goal with this? Well, I mean, obviously it's a new edition, and we want to find the right balance of making sure it's something that people see from the first edition. They love the first edition. That's not a brand new game, because games that completely change between editions do have a tendency to lose large chunks of audience. But games that are identical to the previous edition also do because people feel like they already own that game and they don't need to buy one. So there's a market concern there, but also from a design perspective, there's lots of things that I wanted to change. And I felt it was more than just here's a few pages of errata that we incorporate into the text. I felt like there needs to be some underpinnings that could change, but I felt like I could do it in a way that was still very similar to the original game. So hired a team. They worked with me on that because it was a new core rule kit, because I had lots of, they weren't major changes, but there were small changes, lots of ramifications. That didn't mean that I had long red line phase. I had a long development phase. But I was very comfortable where the manuscript was at around October-ish of 2021 or 2022. Yeah. Because about a year-long writing cycle. Math is hard. Yeah, we spent about a year talking about it, then about a year working on it. Because at one point, actually, I remember now, one point we were talking about doing this as a puppy edition. Actually turning this kind of here's a stripped down version for kids to play, and then we decided that it's better to do a really strong set and then maybe do a future version of that. We're still kicking that around. But then, yeah, so many years developing it. By the end of October 2022, I felt pretty confident that it was in a good place. So Rich said, great, we'll put that into the queue for crowdfunding. We decided on late January, and I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to be moving overseas to the UK, but it's Pugmire. Nothing bad should happen. It should be fine. So I started playtesting it. I ran some playtests online. I gave it some groups to run as playtests online. And I did, I believe it was, I think it was when the Redmond role playing, but I did a few stream plays with those original rule set. And that's what the time that Travis is remembering is like I gave it some groups with that manuscript.
Yeah, I believe I believe that's where my confusion was coming from, because there was a little bit of it that kind of got out into the world, but
yeah. And then there's a timeline because I have memorized this because it is engraved in my head. January 6th, 2023, Travis. January 6th.
Something about that date is cursed. But continue.
Quinkly.
It was rumored that there was going to be some major changes to the open game license, which would have caused Pugmire to be pretty dramatically impacted. But we had locked in January 24th as being the date we were going to launch with the crowdfunding campaign. So I sent a panic message to the Monday meeting team. Rich like, talk about it Monday. And I'm like, but Rich like, Monday? Like, all right. Monday, we talked about...
Don't think about it until Monday, Eddie.
Right.
Don't.
And of course, I didn't obsess about it all weekend at all. What are you talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. Why would you?
But come on Monday, I did actually have a chance to think it through. And I was like, okay, well, honestly, there's a lot of things I kind of wanted to do, but I wasn't sure about because of the previous conversation about trying to keep it relatively connected to the OGL and certain expectations set. But I'd always been a little frustrated because a lot of people at a glance looked at Pugmire and said, oh, it's 5e, and tried to cram it into the box of 5e. And it's like one of those squares where it's like just like a quarter inch too big around where the slot is supposed to go in. So like it does fit. You have to cram it really hard and hope you don't break it. And so I had always been a little frustrated with how it was kind of positioned. And so I was like, okay, maybe this is just a time to go ahead and pull further back. And Rich is absolutely going to do that. So I spent 2 weeks while people were packing up my house and I was trying to get my dog set out and everything, rewriting that manuscript and adjusting the rules as much as I can. That was the version that went out to crowdfunding campaigns, because we were even talking to James of like, if I get some chapters in, but I'm still writing others, James can do it week to week, then maybe I can be finishing up some chapters while James puts the first ones out. Luckily, I got it all to him, I think, the day before we launched. It was very, very to the wire.
If you want to play-by-play behind the scenes of this is how things function in a role-playing game company, this is the panel to have. None of that stuff was overt, I hope, to anyone in our community, but we were scrambling, like Eddie was saying, like, okay, plan 7 on this.
Right.
If this happens,
we're
going to do this.
It was
plan 8. We burn everything down. Plan 9, profit. Plan 10.
Yes.
It was almost like the textbook definition of panic in the pantry, and justifiably so. I mean,
well, many people's pantries were threatened.
Oh yes, but I say all that because, not to say, we made all the changes just because of the OGL license, but rather I've always felt that constraints and adversity often leads to better products when they're managed correctly. And tooting my own horn a little bit, I think we ultimately, after I got talked down by several people, we did manage to implement that correctly. And I think the game is a lot better as a result. I'm actually much happier with this game now than I was even 3 months prior to that. And the more I run it now in its current states, the more I feel like, yes, this is actually where I really did want to take the game, even though I wouldn't convince myself that was the case. And that's why I felt even stronger. Like, okay, it really does deserve. It is an Onyx20 system. It is our own distinct system. Yes, it comes from an earlier iteration of the rules that are now in Creative Commons. So, but the point is, this is something that is distinctly ours now, and it's got a lot of support and good design behind it, good testing behind it. People seem really, really happy with it, and so I think it's definitely a good kind of other system for Onyx Path to potentially build on in the future.
Yeah, it's basically OGL forced us to go even further in the direction you were hoping and wanting to go in anyway.
Yeah. Even though I was talking myself out of that.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure that it maybe didn't feel like it at the time, but in watching that process, from somebody who had seen it kind of as it was coming together, and then as it was ready to go out the door, and then as things had to shift to become what ultimately became Onyx20. Watching that occur, it seemed like a lot of the changes that were made were those things that were relatively small on their face, but would have the knock-on implications, would sort of shift the function of the system more in line with what you were aiming for, but also just to differentiate, I guess, kind of what we were looking at. I'm thinking of both in terms of things like the introduction of morale, but also the terminology around how magic works and things along those lines.
Yeah, and I think it also helps because again, one of the things I saw in first edition was a lot of people who had some familiarity with D&D 5th edition or even older editions of D&D would apply their knowledge of the previous rule sets to Pugmire and then find out that it didn't work that way, and it became a point of confusion. Whereas if we can move things more clearly in a different direction, then what you have is people going, okay, I kind of know how this works, but now I should read how this game works because it's now more distinctly a new game. So, for example, one of the rules that, again, seems small on its face, but has a huge ramification is tests, what used to be saving throws. I went to giving those, you roll 2d20 and pick the higher result rather than adding a flat bonus to them. And the first time I was doing this playtesting, people forgot that because they're so used to you add your proficiency bonus to your saving throws in D&D. But how the math works, and I actually checked this with a statistician, is that at earlier levels, it basically rolling 2d20, picking the higher result adds an effective plus 3.5 to rolls. So obviously that's much swingier, then that's fine. But that means that at lower levels, you're actually more likely to save when you need that bump to save from important things to keep from killing you. But at higher levels, when your stamina points go up and you have more things to combat with, then that number kind of still caps at 3.5. So that way you're not going to save as often, but then you have other things to back you up and take care of you. And so it's like there was a lot of most of the changes I have that kind of level of thought into them of like, here's how this stuff packs out, because I want this experience to land in a very specific kind of way. And the system I originally had chosen for it didn't quite work in that thing. But now it's not, I have to remember all these different rules from a game I know how to play. Now there's a new system that's kind of like that. And so I can make sure it's easier to remember the rules if the word terminology is different, it's presented differently.
Right. I would absolutely agree. And it was really cool to see, again, just kind of watching it iterate out, some of those distinctive elements that you mentioned, the tests, you mentioned, I had brought up the magic stuff. And I know some of the terminology that wound up in Onyx 20 kind of sprang from terminology that like was introduced like with Squeaks in the Deep and things along those lines.
Yeah. And some of it also is terminology that we use in other Onyx Path games. That's the other thing I could do is, for example, as opposed to calling something a reaction, I call it a reflexive action, because that's terminology we use in our other Story Path games. Some of the like might is a terminology that we use in Story Path games as opposed to strength. So it also gave me a chance to kind of pair and make those systems a little more obviously connected. And it's like, oh, yeah, I know how might works in the game of Classified. I know how might works in Onyx20 on some level, because that word is the same and it's used in roughly the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that gives a nice kind of two-way bridge, right? So if you're encountering, let's say you've only been a fan of Story Path, you've only really played Story Path games. If you're encountering Realms of Pugmire for the first time, you're going to see a lot of familiar terms, even if the way the dice behave functions differently.
Right.
And the opposite is true. If you're familiar, if you come to Pugmire by way of D&D, and then you say, oh, well, now I'm going to try They Came From, you'll have a little bit of a better understanding of what does this word mean.
Similarly, when I was describing to the Realms of Pugmire stream I did earlier at the convention, one of the players wasn't as familiar with it, so I was describing how Fortune worked, and they said, oh, it's like momentum. Yes, it is a lot like momentum. So, I mean, again, the more people see connections by being able to reframe it, it's not D&D with some weird bits added on. It's, oh, this is an Onyx Path game that just plays a lot like a fantasy game that's very similar to D&D.
Right.
Absolutely. Rich, is there any, I guess, additional insight? Obviously we all know that Eddy had a bit of a rough patch there when
no, that was really funny.
when things got
so stressed.
We were laughing.
Oh my God.
Every Monday meeting, Eddy was just like, and it was like, look at you.
Yeah. The love and support of my colleagues is non-existent.
So were there any, I guess if you could talk a little bit about kind of like what your view from a publisher perspective of this event slash occurrence slash opportunity, and how that sort of gave birth to the idea of, yes, we're going to go ahead and do Onyx 20 as opposed to taking some other direction with Pugmire in light of what happened with the OGL. I guess what fueled that decision from you from a publishing perspective?
You mean to actually make a branded Onyx 20 rule set?
Yeah, exactly.
So that was always part of the plan. We were going to do it for Pugmire and then bring it out as an announced thing. You like the system in Pugmire, now we're going to be using it here.
Right.
We had to bring that out early, and we don't have a logo for it yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of what went on with the OGL, and we wanted to be at least a little bit ahead of that massive tidal wave of angst and anxiety that ensued. So, that was our the really moving the timeline this way for when we started talking about it. We had plans during the Kickstarter to start to talk about this new system that had been created, because it was something Eddie worked really hard on. I know he consulted with you on a few aspects of it and stuff like that. So we had put time and effort and everything to come up with this way before this whole thing occurred. And so when we were doing the Kickstarter, knowing that there were people who needed to know that this was an actual thing, we're going to be doing this thing. And then, of course, it sounded like we were just one of the 17 companies that were doing, we're not doing that anymore. We've got a black flag. And
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
Yeah, we're all Spartacus. We're all Groot is what we are. And, so, it just became really just a little bit more of a, well, we were going to make a big deal out of this, but now nobody, hello? Nobody. Okay. You know what? We're going to do the thing we're going to do, because for what we wanted to do it for, that's all still true. That's all still relevant. The hoopla we might have been able to do with it, was going to get drowned out.
Right.
We're doing Onyx20. So we decided we just move ahead with it, and enough worrying about it. Let's do a really good, cool game and have this thing, which is what we wanted all along, have this tool in our toolbox to come out if we want to do another again, like I say, I call it Die-20 game,
right,
just to differentiate, because we have to
Die-10 game, Die-20 game. Yeah, no sense.
Well, I don't even call it Die-10 games, because there's other games that use Die-10s, like a dice pool game, because it's the core mechanic is you roll a pool of dice. Core mechanic for Die-20 games is, you roll a Die-20. You could roll a whole bunch of other dice too, which is, the polyhedral thing. But anyway, end of the day, we're still looking at some of the projects we already had that were using the OGL. We did do Scarland's Pathfinder edition, as Eddie mentioned, and we did Scarland's 5th edition. We don't know where that thread's going to take us right now in terms of what happens to Scarlands as 5th edition changes into what do we just call it, a D&D and D&D and D&D and D.
The latest iteration of the world's most popular,
most beloved and popular role-playing game. We don't know really where that's going to land, but when we do, then we'll have a much better idea of what we can do. Obviously, as also Eddie pointed out, with the previous iterations all being thrown into the Creative Commons, there's okay, we could move from that. We could move it to we could move to whatever D&D and D&D and D&D and D edition, what that's going to be. We could move it to Onyx20. Right. We don't have to do any of those things. We're not required by, a mandate or anything like that. So we're going to see how it looks and what each of those things does to what Scarlands is, and what we respond to, what we think would be the best version of a new edition of Scarlands if we get to that stage. Right now, we're thrilled that we're getting the kind of people involved in the community in the Slurician Vault who are getting these amazing projects out there that are really in-depth, really well done, and that gives us a little bit of space to let people catch up to where Scarlands actually is and continue. But as we always say, if it's something that just sits there without new releases, people think the line is dead, and then there's a on-off switch in some gamers' minds. I'm not going to pick that up because nothing new is going to come out. New stuff is coming out for Scarlands all the time.
We just had 2 new sizable PDF releases over at the Slurician Vault last week.
Right.
And I believe they're both on like a introductory sale price through the end of the convention. So head over to drive-thru and check that out on the Slurician Vault. Also, if I can build on what you're saying a little bit and maybe offer a little insight into how the sausage is made for our fans. Onyx Path has always been very transparent about the processes that we use for creating stuff, and the release processes. And I think sometimes it's possible for some members of the audience to maybe lose sight of the fact that, like, when we are launching a Kickstarter, for example, we do the Realms of Pugmire Kickstarter, we're still 2 years plus out from that book being out in the world. There are things coming out in the interim. You know what I mean? Well, depending. Up to
we're
right?
pulling those number the how long it takes to get these things
but I mean,
after Kickstarter
at least a year,
Sure.
maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years, but yeah, it's still like not tomorrow.
Right. A period of time during which there are things coming out, to support that line in the interim, and B, during that time, as you mentioned, there's those creative, the community content programs give the audience an opportunity to flesh out those settings as they become available, and sort of really hop on and participate in it and help fill some of those gaps and things that maybe that we wouldn't have thought to make, or wouldn't have had room to make, or wouldn't have had the resources to make. It's much easier for a community content creator to say, I love this city in this setting, so I'm going to do a city source book for it, than it is for us to justify the effort and expense that comes along with doing a city source book, for example.
Absolutely.
And to that end, I guess, do we have any idea with regards to Onyx20, specifically with regards to Realms of Pugmire, the new edition, if, when, and how that will roll out to Canis Minor? I assume at some point that's the intent, but if you...
Sure. I mean, what we've been doing for community content programs is that we hold off until that book is publicly available to all fans. Because what we don't want to do is have, like, say, Kickstarter backers and say, oh, it's open for the vault, or whatever, or Canis Minor.
Right.
But then
a non-backer can't.
Right, they can't contribute because they don't have access to the right material. And also, a lot of times we still have an errata phase to go through, and printing concerns. And even say, okay, I can buy it in PDF, but I want to wait to get it in the game store. But other people are already making content for it, then they feel like they're
already behind the curve. Why try to catch up?
Right, and it feels like they're being punished for waiting. So I mean, and that's not our goal. Our goal was everyone to be excited about this. So once it's it's in all the outlets that we want to put it in. It's available for those outlets as best of our ability. Now we can start talking about opening up the community content program. So it's going to be whenever Realms of Pugmire comes out. But while we haven't formally talked about this, I don't see any reason why we would shut down people making first edition stuff and force people to start making second edition stuff. I mean, I think at least for a while, we would probably have ability to make for both editions. At some point, I may want to shutter the first edition ones for new content, but people still saw the old content, and then focus on the second edition. But I mean, I for at least a time period, I see probably them both being available simultaneously.
Well, and that's
something that's unique, I think, if I may, Travis.
Oh, absolutely.
In our particular relationship, in that Onyx Path is publishing Pugmire, Eddy owns Pugmire,
right,
and he has to take a look at where he's comfortable with opening what up or closing what up based on what he wants Pugmire to be as a thing out there in the world.
Right.
We are looking at it and say we would like to put out more cool Pugmire things and then, sell them.
Right.
So as a publisher, I very, very often defer to where Eddy's comfortable going with Pugmire as a whole, because it's his baby, it's his puppy, and he really needs to be able to make that call, as the creator and owner of Pugmire itself, and if I do feel strongly, if I think, hey, Eddy, don't shut that down. We need that. These are, if you don't mind, these are rabid fans. Or rabbit fans in one case.
At least
one case. One person, Jason Chauskis. We see you.
Yeah, we see you.
Well, and that brings up an interesting point too, to the broader discussion of community content. When you have a situation like right now in Scarred Lands through the Solarian Vault, you can create content under the 5e OGL or under Pathfinder First Edition, right? So you have this opportunity now where you can say to the fan base, look, if you're exploring this world in this system that's covered under the program, and the new material coming out is not with that system, you can adapt that over there because we're not doing that. You know, it's there for you to do that if you so choose. You know, you have the opportunity to sort of bridge those gaps as the programs open up and start including more. I do want to call out one thing I just saw in the chat. That is absolutely specifically not what was just confirmed.
Yeah.
In fact, the literal opposite.
We literally said that we're looking into options.
So just to clarify, there is no confirmation of Scarred Lands doing anything in the future except being awesome and on the Solarian Vault. And us definitely wanting to see your creations come up there. And I know, I don't think it's giving away any trade secrets to say that there are some projects that are kind of simmering in the background, you know, for the Solarian Vault that I haven't had the opportunity to pursue more directly because I've been busy planning this little convention thing that we're doing. So, but you know, keep your eye on the Solarian Vault. There'll be a lot of content coming in the future there, and there's a lot up there right now. So on that note, I guess we have a couple of questions that I would like to just pose for a moment. I guess if I can rephrase a bit, how do you see what are some major points that you can focus on from the differences between Onyx Path and 5e from a mechanical perspective?
Oh, you mean Onyx20 and 5e?
Yes, that word.
I mean, the big difference in Onyx Path and 5e is that they're very different companies.
Right, yeah. Onyx
one has a lot of money, the other is Onyx Path.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
But no.
One's owned by a mega corporation and one's us.
Right.
Just us.
But luckily, I do own the entire RPG industry, so it really nets out.
Ultimately, yes. There are many, many rumors that Eddy secretly owns this, that, the other thing that all add up to he owns the RPG industry.
Right.
Why those rumors start or what
I don't
possible
know.
Value anyone would have to say those things, none of us know.
It's so bizarre to me. But no, the big kind of high level differences between Onyx20 and 5e, I mentioned this earlier, is that how you build antagonists is completely different now. The stat blocks look similar, and that's by design because I wanted them to be familiar to people who played first edition. But without getting too far into the mechanical weeds on this, ultimately, CR is kind of made up nonsense, where it's a number that looks really impressive but doesn't actually mean anything. And so you can't really effectively balance in 5e. But so what I've done is that I've restructured it now, as opposed to CR, you now have an opponent level. And they work just like player character levels. So if you have a level 3 character, you put them against a level 3 antagonist, they should have a roughly even fight. The player character has certain advantages like fortune and tricks that will give them advantage over the enemy. So like the odds are very slightly in the favor of the player character, and that's just by design. But then a game master can go, okay, cool. I have a collected total of 6 player character levels. So I have 6 levels of antagonists to drop in. I should have a roughly even fight. It could be 1 level 6 character, 6 level 1 characters, what have you. I've also added in 2 switches, which we started playing with in Pirates, but I kind of spell it more effectively. Minions and legendary characters. Minions are basically, they're there to just kind of be a road bump, a fun little quick fight. They have 1 stamina point and they fail all of their tests. So if you do power on them, it's going to work. If you hit them with a sword, they're going to die. That's what their goal is, to kind of just be like, let's have a quick moment and bloop, bloop, okay, then move on. Legendary are your boss fights. This is they get triple the stamina points, and they get 3 attacks as opposed to 1, or 3 more attacks, I should say. And they never retreat, they never flee. So, and the idea is that you could put these tags on any antagonist in the book, so you can make a minor and a boss version of any character. Again, this is all kind of in the service of making things easier for the guide to be able to build encounters, because in D&D, it's kind of an eyeball math thing, and I wanted to make that a lot clearer, where it's like, it's still not going to be perfect. I firmly believe that white room balance is not a thing that exists in tabletop role-playing games. So you're going to make this kind, and your group will probably steamroll it, or another group will probably do badly against it. But mathematically, on average, it should be a roughly even thing.
And I can really relate to that, Eddie. When I did the switch from my way early adventure, or Crossroads kind of, and then did the Down in the Hole.
Oh yeah,
adventure, which came out just a little over a year ago, which is just amazing. So much has changed. That mostly I would look at the old notes from like D&D 1 or 2 and try to extrapolate into the creatures that they were presenting there, and go and kind of really the fudgiest of fudges, which is also kind of how I did it back in the day too. So it didn't resonate with me much, but I was aware that, like, having done some encounter design and stuff for like 4th edition and things like that, with Spirigos originally it was a 4th edition adventure for Scarlands, and that was like, we are going to give you exactly what you need right here. Okay, thank you. And if you have this, you should have 4 of these, but also this kind of what do they used to call them? The brute, or what was the? Forget now. Travis.
Oh yeah. You need to have a martial caster and something else. Yeah.
Yeah, they had separate categories. Almost
right
roles.
and so it was just like very much the written, so it was very easy for you to do that. And 5th edition, I thought, oh, well, here we go. CR, it would be the same thing. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. No. And that's why, like I said to the play testers, which Eddie was one of and Travis was one of too, for that adventure, was like, let's see how these things, because I don't actually know whether this encounter is going to wipe you guys out or be something you just walk through and go, yeah, it was okay. Let's bind a wound over here. Okay, we're done.
Right. Rectum. Yeah. So that was something I definitely wanted to work on. Spells also I redid because D&D has this weird thing. It's a legacy decision. I know why it is, actually. It's because I was done back in the day and you can't really get rid of it, which is that there's a lot of spells at the middle and high level which are basically better versions of previous spells. So you have multiple versions of the same spell and you never really need a reason to use the earlier version of the spell. So I changed all slots to points and just made that so that way spells just you put more points into them, they get more powerful. And allowed me to also collapse and combine a lot of spells. Like there are 4 different spells that do some form of make a cloud that does a thing, and it's like one's stinky, one's acid, one's you can't see through it, and it's like just make it all one cloud spell. And then you have different modifiers you can activate if you want to. And then also just little things like clarifying language. Like I switched spell level to magnitude because I actually ran into people who aren't familiar with D&D who kept thinking, oh, I'm level 3 magic user, so I should cast level 3 spells, which is a perfectly logical deduction that's absolutely wrong.
Yep.
Yes. And there's some confusing language in the legacy. I think because that was how it was sorted out by people figuring it out around a table in 74, and ever since then people said, oh, you can't change that, that's holy writ.
Yeah, exactly. The reason why we have a 3 to 18 scale on attributes that we almost never use, haven't used really in a meaningful way in the past 2 editions, but that's just how it's always done. Got to keep it. And the third big thing I would say is that I have random character creation now, or what essentially I call template character creation. Because for Pugmire specifically, I noticed that our tendency as Onyx Path to do ready-made characters wasn't actually as useful as I had hoped it would be, because most people wanted to do is they wanted to make their dog. And that's a very specific use case that I just hadn't anticipated. I should have maybe, but I didn't. Because I was thinking more like a typical role play game where it's like, you don't know what to make, so grab a character and start playing. But no, they want to make their dog. So
and conversely, a bunch of people wanted to make their cat when we did Monarchies of Mao.
Yeah.
But there are also a bunch of people who said, I'm not going to make my cat because he's such an asshole.
Well, that's true.
And they love him for it, but they don't just want to play him.
Right. Is I don't want to live in that headspace. That's just awful.
That was hilarious, actually.
And so I created template character creation. The idea was that you could pick packages off of lists. It was expansion of something that I started to do in first edition, but I never quite went as far with it maybe as I wanted to. The idea is like literally go, okay, my dog is kind of a derp, but likes to play with things and likes to run. So I'll pick the righty bit, I'll play the fighty bits, and the other bits, and then put this on a sheet, and then I have a character. And when I started doing the breakdown for that, I realized that all of them were even numbered between 4 to 10 as range. I was like, oh, I could just add dice rolls to these. And so I did a few dice roll tests, and I tweaked some math and some numbers. And so we did a test of it actually at Savian Sphere last year. We did a test of random character creation, and I got some really great feedback from that. But now you can make a character completely randomly in 10 minutes, and it's not going to be maximized efficient, but there's going to be no obvious holes in it.
Right.
And actually, some of my players in the actual play this weekend, and one was in chat now, were just saying they've really enjoyed just doing that kind of random character creation. And sometimes you get a slightly weird choices, but the nice thing about it is also because it's both, you can just say, okay, I'm overriding the dice roll I'm just picking a choice because that makes more sense to my character, and there's nothing breaks if you do that. But also, I am finding over the years I'm gravitating back to random character creation, which I despised for decades, because I do like the creative challenge of how do I make all of this stuff hang together and be a viable character concept.
Yeah, I would love to see us do more weird random tables, just because we had so much fun back in the day. With all many games, not just Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, obviously there's companies that their game was a whole bunch of tables that just went together, and then you did a little role playing around them, but charts and tables. But the fun you can have with the random stuff, just because we really want to make a really cool character, but sometimes you don't want to put you don't want to put the effort in. You don't want to put the brain seriousness into it. You just want to make something up so you can go for a yes, I'm definitely a dragon man, but I don't breathe fire. According to this, I actually ooze slime out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
But what about the fire? Slime. I'm the slime guy. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
Like a slug.
It is possible in Pokemon random character creation to play magic user can cast spells.
Yeah,
you do other stuff, but you don't cast spells.
Well, I think
wave your paws around a lot.
As somebody who's creeping up on the 40th anniversary of me starting playing role playing games, which is bizarre.
That all? You youngin', sweet young child.
But at my age, I have grown. I don't want to say completely exhausted with the concept of playing a maximized character, but it's one of the least fun things for me to play. I love playing a character who's got something a little bit not ideal, or a little bit not the decision you would have made if you were trying to min-max something out. So I dig that. Because it gives you the opportunity to explore some of those.
Right, absolutely. The role-playing challenge is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
We do have one more question I want to get to before we start the wrap-up, which is, how would you implement a failing forward mechanic in Onyx 20, similar to complications in StoryPath?
I feel like we already have one in Onyx 20 as written. I haven't really talked about it yet. One of the new rules in Onyx 20 is that if you roll a 1, you generate a fortune. And this is something that I had been noodling for a while, and I started testing it out even before I did the 4 cool rule set, and I'm really happy how it turned out. It's not as direct as StoryPath, because StoryPath is okay, you fail, but you get a small benefit like immediately. This is a little more removed, but I think it fits the playstyle better, where it's like, okay, I rolled a 1, I fail, I absolutely fail, but I immediately see, okay, but the group gets a benefit because it's going into the fortune pool. So I contributed to the game in some way. I may not be the person who cashes in that fortune down the road, but the group gets a benefit for me screwing up here. That is a refinement of a previous rule, which is that if you play one of your character personality traits, if you intentionally fail playing into one of those traits, then you also generate fortune. So I mean,
got to open up this door. I've got to do it because I've got this massive curiosity trait.
Right. Yeah. And that is a refinement of what I tend to do at tables anyway. And I even did it in both the actual plays, which is I'll give you a fortune if you do this thing that's really, really stupid. And usually players go, yeah, give me a fortune. That's great.
Give me a treat. Give me a treat. Give me a treat.
Exactly. Come here. Go get it.
Down to the lake.
Off the cliff. Woo. You know. And so that's, I'm rewarding you before the failure even happens, right? So on a purely high level of failing forwards, that's how that works. I mean, I could do a version that's like complication where it's if you roll just under the number that maybe you get some kind of partial success. I could put that into Onyx20, and that's something maybe that in future iterations we might look into. I feel like it's slightly overcomplicating the problem, because the big difference I feel between games like Onyx20 and games like Storypath is that Onyx20 is emulating a very specific style of tabletop role-playing game, which is that you have almost immediate feedback on your roll. There's more dice rolling that happens, but the feedback is pretty fast and pretty immediate. I roll die, I pretty quickly know exactly whether I succeeded or failed, and then we roll into the consequences of either of those options. Storypath is much more about you roll slightly less often, and you have to parse your die roll. But once you do, then a lot of things open up very, very quickly. And you have a currency to spend, and it kind of covers a slightly larger area, but you can do more. So it's like in Onyx20, it's I pull out my sword and I sling them, roll die. Okay, you hit. Here's the damage you do. Let's narrate that and move on. Storypath is, okay, roll your dice, compare it to the defense. Okay, I have extra hits, so I'm going to actually knock their sword out of their hands, or this other thing. I'm going to activate this power, which gives me a thing next turn. So it's more to do, but you have more to play with. And because Storypath is a little more about pushing an overall collective narrative forward, with the Onyx20 style games looking more at individual moment-to-moments things moving forward. You have very small steps forward in very rapid succession, as opposed to slightly larger scenes that you then talk through and play out. At the end, having run one of each this con, it does seem that the pacing is about the same for each system, which is great. So like you still play a game of each and have a satisfying experience at roughly the same amount of time. It's just the time from dice roll to implementation is shorter in Onyx Path, but there's more of it. Whereas Storypath, there's slightly longer, but there's less of it. Or Onyx20, I'm sorry. Now I'm doing it. Onyx Path.
It's my fault.
It was my concern we were coming up with the name. I
did offer PUGS, but that was shot down. Partially, but
that's fair. But I guess on one final parting thought to add to what you were saying, Onyx20 at the end of the day, while you can use it in multiple scenarios, it is at its core, I would think it's fair to say kind of a fantasy combat simulator, right? Whereas Storypath is very much built around the idea that the system is impacting narratively rather than trying to simulate a combat scenario or simulate X scenario. It's another tool in the belt of storytelling, hence the name Storypath.
Right. And Onyx,
you do have things that occur in Storypath that are about resolving a situation, whether that's combat, opening a door, that's locked, or whatever. And as Eddie said, it's not about necessarily every time you need to roll for simple things,
right?
Whereas if you want, you can layer on the rolls in any of the Die20 games, right? Like all right, another 5 feet, you're up to roll again to see if you can get further up. That kind of thing.
Right, and again, like I will always maintain that those are just different kinds of fun. Some people like one over the other, and that's fine, but it does not mean one's objectively better than the other. And that's one of the things that I'm actually pretty happy about when Rich started talking about doing this Onyx20 system, because that means that now as a company, we can actually present two different experiences pretty consistently. Again, not beholden to another company, but it shows that we love all kinds of role-playing games. We love all kinds of ways of playing these games. And so here's two very distinct games, but they still come from a very core DNA. We're all the same designers. We all have the same kind of ethos, like failing forward and not just being able to have nothing to do. There's all sorts of core assumptions that are baked into both of these, but they're very different ways. So whichever one you want to play, and I love them both. So some days I want to play a game like Classify, where I don't know, roll some dice, we'll figure it out. And some days with Onyx Path, I really want a fairly tactical game where you figure out exactly how you're going to defeat the bone bugs and how that works.
Yeah, and I think it also gives an opportunity for anybody who's a game designer who has an idea for a setting and would like to use either one of those systems to immediately go, hey, I'm going to use this because this is the experience that I'm hoping for my game. Or I'm going to use this, I'm going to use Onyx20 instead of Story Path because I want this experience for the game thing. What do you folks at Onyx Path think? Would you be interested in publishing this? Blah, blah, blah. It helps us to focus in the dialogue we're having with the creators out there as well.
Awesome. And I think that's a awesome note to sort of wrap things up on. We are coming up on time, but I would like to just give each of you an opportunity to once again tell us who you are, what you do, your pertinent details, and anything you would like to share with the class. This time, let's do it in reverse order. Rich, sir, please give us your details.
Well, my details are very simple because I try to avoid diving in too much in the social medias unless somebody's going completely in the wrong direction with things that they've heard us do. Then I will attempt to correct that misapprehension. But every week, the Monday Meeting Notes blog goes over what we're doing after we had our major meeting on Monday with all of the leads creatively, and then I write a blog every damn week.
Every damn week.
Except more of you should read it because I put the effort in and you should be doing it. But we're having some great conversations in the comments section over the last bunch of weeks. We've been delving into horror and urban fantasy and stuff like that as a how would you do these sorts of things? What would you like to see? Sort of things, and they've been absolutely fantastic, as well as our normal conversations about the other things that we're working on. So that is a one sure place. If you have questions or thoughts or things you just like to, you can get on there and just say, Rich, why did you decide to do this, or why is there no more books for that, or whatever? That's it. The comment section is really the best place if you just want to have a nice chat with me. Sweet.
And Eddy, how about you?
You can find most of my work at pugsteady.com. That's PUGSTADY. That's also where you can find me on Twitter and dice.camp. Most every Friday, you also talking this kind of nonsense without Rich, but with my other colleagues, Matthew Dawkins, Dixie Cochran, and Danielle Lazon on the Onyx Pathcast. So please come listen to that because we have put in 268 episodes worth of effort into that, so you should listen to it. That's a lot.
It's just as much fun as it was on day one, if not more.
Thank you very much. We did one live episode earlier today, and it was exactly as rambling and off topic as you would expect.
And let me congratulate you on hitting such a bizarre, oddly numbered milestone. But I'm going to congratulate you on it.
268.
I don't know why I have it number off the top of my head, but it's certainly it's better than just 300 maybe.
You probably looked today because you were ready to do it and went, oh yeah, look at that.
I think that's what happened actually.
Right, exactly.
But otherwise, you can find me in the Onyx Path Discord. I'm usually hanging out in a lot of the game lines that I'm either involved with or directly overseeing, or you can find me in the off-topic section where I'm talking about things like,
Transformers
or Transformers or the Princess Bride RPG. So
that is fair. And yeah, definitely, if you've not yet done so, head over to our Discord. All the events for the weekend are scheduled there as well. I also do want to thank both of you for taking the time to be on this panel. Thank everyone who's watching, whether live or on VOD, for your time and attention. And I want to once again remind you that the reason for the season is to support our buddies over at Bodhana. Please check out the Bodhana group. check out their website to learn about their work. Head over to the donation link. Every penny going in that direction helps. And keep an eye out for branch riders info as that grows closer to a releasable level.
If you missed that, when it's up on our YouTube, check it out because it's just so full. The panel we did on it was so full of information about branch riders and the impetus for it, how it works on like as both a game and as something that they're seeing as a tool that can be used for people to help each other. It's really amazing.
Excellent. And you actually can also see it in play. They did an actual play over the weekend, which I believe aired over at Dork Tales, but we'll be ultimately, I think, making it over over toward our YouTube at some point in the near future. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. Wash your hands, wear masks, all that fun stuff. And we will be back here, I think, in 30 minutes or so for a panel with our buddies at Roll20. But in the interim, I'm going to raid us out over to, I believe, the World Below actual play is still in progress. So we'll go check that out.
Let's do the police squad ending.